Okay, I think that did it. Maybe? Yes, wonderful. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for tonight's lecture. My name is Katie Zimmerman from Lake Johnson Park, and I will be your host for this evening. As a friendly reminder, this lecture is being recorded. If you do not wish to appear on the recording, please turn your camera off. And to reduce feedback, everyone was muted upon entrance. If you have questions during the presentation, please utilize the chat feature, and I will read them out when appropriate. But there will also be time for a Q&A at the end of the lecture. And with me here, I have two people from the Department of Air Quality, excuse me, not air equality. And I'll let them introduce themselves before they take it away. Go ahead, guys.
I'm Keith Bamberger, and I am an information specialist for the Division of Air Quality. I work out of the Asheville Regional Office, and I do a lot of statewide projects also. We do teacher workshops. We work directly with students. We have a contest for 7th graders. And but if you want to do a direct programming in the western part of the state, just get in touch with me.
Cool. And I'm Johnina Millis, but a lot of people call me JJ. And I cover all the areas that aren't the West. So that's looking like your Valley region, all the way out to the Atlantic, doing the same things that Keith is doing, going into classrooms, doing teacher workshops, assisting with that 7th grade contest that he was just mentioning. So if you know someone who's interested in air quality content or maybe has some questions and is in the Raleigh area or East, feel free to reach out to me.
So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. You should see the screen now. Yes, no? Good. So this is a brief history of air in reverse. And I want to start in reverse because of good things, but a little bit about the department, statewide agency providing science-based environmental stewardship for the health and prosperity of all North Carolinians. And especially something that we like to make students aware of is that if you like science and you like to be outside, the department is a good place to be. We've got about 2,000 people who work for the department. And, maybe 10% or less are in labs doing that sort of science. We're out there running our monitoring, we're taking samples, we're doing all sorts of different things within the department. Now, we are the Division of Air Quality, and so our job is to make sure the air is clean for human health, given authorization by the EPA to the state. I like sharing this photo of the word Sakugonij, which was the first word that I ever heard in a scientific workshop when I came to North Carolina about 20 or 30 years ago. But it's a Cherokee word for the land of blue mist-like smoke. And I live in the mountains, so I find it really interesting how life has brought me back to teach about air in the mountains. And there's good news. For the last 10 years, we have had clean air in North Carolina. Now that means that we haven't always had clean air in the past, and we still can have unhealthy air now, especially when we have forest fires. But most of the time, the air is clean and healthy. Got some data that shows how the air has gotten cleaner. And if you want to take a deep dive, this should link through. Maybe, maybe not. I'll just do it a different way. So we have on our NCDAQ website, which you can get to by going just ncair.org. We have a whole report about the trends, about clean and dirty air. But what we know from using the science, from monitoring the air, measuring things, that our air has gotten much, much cleaner since 1990 when we first started measuring it. minimize this. So we have clean trends, but I want to start by reminding y'all why air is important. And this is how I start almost every single presentation. It may be the most difficult thing anybody asks you to do all day, because I'm going to put my hand like this in front of that camera. And then while my hand is here, I would like you to hold your breath until I bring my hand down. So I always start by stretching out my lungs by taking deep breaths to better prepare myself to do this. And when I work with students, I ask them to pay attention to their different body systems, see how they're affected. I'm not going to ask you to do that, but you might want to. So I'll give you a countdown. Okay, I'd like everybody to stop breathing in 5, 4, 3, 2. So that was 30 seconds of not having air. And for a typical adult, that's 10 or 5 to 10 breaths. It usually is about a couple liters of air in a day. We usually take for an adult, usually about 20,000 breaths. Young people breathe and old people both breathe more often, which is one of the reasons why we consider them to be more sensitive to air pollution. And air at its core is pretty simple. I mean, at the same time, it's really complex because it's actually invisible. There's very little mass. So we have to use tools to understand the air. And behind me, I've got a periodic table. And I have this because I want to show you the parts of the air. And like this is a model of an oxygen molecule. Oxygen's right here. It's the most important part of the air, but it's not the most common part of the air. That would be nitrogen. Again, it's a double molecule. It's got a triple bond, and oxygen and nitrogen are right next to each other on this periodic table. So they're really similar. And the other part of the air that we all think about a lot, well, there are two parts we think about a lot. One of them, carbon dioxide. So it's oxygen, carbon, and the carbon molecule is right here. So these three molecules right next to each other on the periodic table are what most of air is. There is, of course, a little bit of water in the air, and this is H2O. So it's got the oxygen again. It's got hydrogen, which is way over here. But those gases are not in the air proportionally. Now this container, 1,000 beads, 780 of them are the blue oxygen, 210 represent the 21% of that is oxygen. 780 of them represent the nitrogen, 78%. A little bit of argon in here, purple beads, which don't really come up very well on the camera. They look red. And then there's half a black bead. So that's what air is. And we have to understand it because we have to understand what clean air is and dirty air is to understand the health of the air. We do this by measuring it. So there are different ways to think about the air. If I were asked by a student to give a definition, I say that air's a visible mixture of gases with a little water, a little bit of solids, makes up the atmosphere, weather happens there, and keeps everything alive. So why do we care? Well, we care for a lot of things, but our job at the Division of Air Quality is to be concerned with health and environmental impacts. There are lots of different ways it affects humans. Asthma is one of the big things because there's an air pollutant. It's called ground level ozone. And ground level ozone is like oxygen, except it's got 3 different atoms, and it sits there and juggles around like this perpetually until it finds something to give this molecule away to. And what it most often gives it away to when we're breathing is water. And then it actually goes through a chemical reaction and turns into hydrogen peroxide in our lungs. This can trigger asthma attacks, even in people who don't have asthma. So there are health effects, and they're immediate. Heart and lung disease, visibility. I mean, the difference between these two, this is has a particle pollution, or PM 2.5. This was not a great visibility day. It wasn't actually an unhealthy day, but it has a big effect on tourism in the mountains. So we have tools to help educate people about that. And this is our air quality index. So we color code the health of the air. And the reason we do this is to make it easy for us to tell you when the air is unhealthy, when it's not clean, whether it's from a forest fire or other fires, or just a general day where there's a lot of ground level ozone and other pollutant. And the levels here change depending on the behavior, or we link these values to the behavior. So on an orange air quality day, people sensitive to unhealthy air should spend less time being active outdoors in the afternoon. And we even can, hold on, I'm going to bring up a website again. We even have ways that you can find out about this. So we have an air quality portal that shows you every day what the air quality is like. And if I go ahead and put in Wake County, since I'm in Buncombe County, but I'm in the minority, I think, today. So it shows what the air quality is like for today. You can view a map for tomorrow. It's supposed to be a little bit worse in the center of the state, but not particularly bad. Still yellow. Yellow, some air pollution in the air, but not enough to make people unhealthy. You can even look at the current conditions. So each one of these spots on this map is a monitor where we're collecting data right now. So we're using that science all the time to make sure the air is clean and healthy. And if you are really interested in knowing what the air quality is, we partner with the EPA on Air Now. You can subscribe to get an air quality forecast for the place you live in, North Carolina. Now, we do county by county forecasting, and we do that because North Carolina, as in is a lot of other natural areas, geology and limnology and water, and it's really complex because we've got these 3 terrains. So I'm going to stop sharing this. But not only does it affect people, it affects plants and animals. And I'm going to let Janina talk a little bit about plants and animals. So I think I'll go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, cool. Well, just real quick, how of the folks on this call, how many are classroom teachers versus who all works in like a non-formal setting? If you want to just throw that into the chat real quick, I'll keep talking. But one of the things that I find really interesting about my job is being able to help people understand the connection between air quality and how that can physically affect things. So I guess second question that you all can throw into the chat, what all do you know about lichen? Where do you find it? Do you know what it is? From current slide. Okay. And I'm going to look at the chat on my phone so I can actually see what's going on.
Oh,
So,
Jade, I can read it out if you like, so you don't have to use it on your phone.
yes, that'd be great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry.
Yep. So we've got one who says that they are a licensed geologist that works in environmental consulting. Another who says they are a retired teacher. And then for your lichen question, Ruth says that lichen is not a plant. Can you repeat the actual question? Because I'm confused by one of these answers.
Just what do you know about lichen? What do you have questions about?
Okay. Another person said trees. I'm not sure what the full thought is there.
Okay.
Another person says that lichen covers the rocks that I'm trying to look at. That's the geologist.
I understand. Yes.
And that is all of your answers so far. I think I'm getting a clarification here on the trees comment. Um, all right. Another person shared that they are a student who wants to work in education, and what she knows is that lichen grows on rocks. And then, yes, Lisa clarified that lichen grows on trees.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Those are all wonderful things to know about lichen because they are all true. So, lichen are really interesting, especially for the work that Keith and I do, because they are what we consider to be bioindicators for air quality, where they can physically show us whether how good or how bad our air quality is. So they're kind of these like biological monitoring systems. So where our meteorologists are looking at data coming in from monitors that we have all over the state. If you wanted to incorporate a little bit of citizen science into your work life, lichens would be the place to do it because of those bioindicators. So I'm actually going to bop around for a second because, nope. So lichens, get all their nutrients from the air. So if there's really good stuff in the air, they're going to be green and happy and healthy, versus if there's not good stuff in the air, a lot of pollutants in the air, they're going to look different. They're going to physically change and tell us that something is wrong. Sometimes that mean, a little bit of bleaching. So like this image right here, you can kind of see how this lichen is slightly whiter on the inside parts versus the slightly darker green over here, versus a darkening, so almost like a molding, if you will. But if you happen to pass by the same tree, same bench, regularly, and you recognize a decline in their growth rate, that might also mean that something could be affecting our air quality. Now, these aren't the cases all the time because there are obviously outside influences, children playing at the park, birds trying to create nests, there are other things that could be indicators. But these guys are really cool because of the studies that we can do with them, because they help us understand just how clean our air is. So when we're talking to people about these lichens, we're talking about them in these three kind of categories. So we have what is called crustose, or our crusty lichen, where it almost looks like mold on a piece of bread, and it's so attached to its substrate or the thing that it's growing on that, for example, with this image of this crusty lichen here, if you were to try to like pick that off, you would damage the tree as well. Our foliose lichen, or our leafy lichen, is this guy right here. So to me, kind of looks like Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, a little more 3D, some more dimension to it. But my favorite lichen, but also the pickiest lichen, is this guy right here, our fruticose, or our bushy lichen. So what's kind of the main difference between these two guys is this one is growing on a single stalk and then has all these kind of branches coming off of it. And so because there's so much surface area that that lichen uses to pull in the ingredients or the nutrients from the air, if there's more pollution, it's going to be more affected by it. So because of that, this guy can be a little trickier to find. So I live very, very, very close to Lake Johnson. pretty much a stick throw, if you will. And one of the things that I really love about the lake is being able to go for a walk, just putzing around and being able to find all three different kinds of these lichen. So even though we're just ever so slightly outside of downtown Raleigh, having all three of these kinds of lichen available means that our air quality is really good. So as I'm kind of switching gears real quick to take you to our Lichen or Not website.
Quick couple of questions here while you are switching gears. Yeah. First one is if they can get the links sent to us, if you don't mind me, if you send that to me, then I can share it to all of the participants.
Yes, can do that.
Amazing. And then the second question is, what are lichens classified as?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So I'm going to actually switch gears again because lichen are kind of a category on their own. They're not a plant, they're not a fungus, but they are kind of a combo of both because they are a mixture of algae and fungus. So through this very creative diagram I have here, the fungus is kind of these the fungus is going to provide the structure of the lichen, where the algae, which is more of the plant of the lichen, is going to provide the food and the photosynthetic process of that lichen. So it's not a plant, it's not a moss, it's a lichen. It's its own thing. So that was a great clarifying question. And another thing I forgot to mention about lichen is there are many, many thousands of species of lichen. And so because of that, it is really, really hard to identify them, which is why we kind of break them down into those three different categories. But taking you all back to our Lichen or Not webpage, and in order to get to that little diagram that is linked right here. So once I share that website, you all be able to get to it. But we use lichen as a community science opportunity because regardless of where you go, whether you're out in rural North Carolina or you're living downtown Greensboro, downtown Asheville, you can find lichen somewhere. Lichen are growing everywhere. So very easy to take students out to explore their environment, kind of regardless of where they are. So here on this webpage, we've got a whole list of lichen activities. We've got a very kid-friendly like tally sheet where kids can go around and just make note of how many of the different kinds of lichen they see. We've got a more advanced student survey where students will take pictures of lichen that they see, but also identify what kind they see, how much sun they predict it to get, how close it is to water, along with other characteristics as well. And then one of the other things that we have is once that data from that survey is collected, it is auto-populated into what we have as an ArcGIS map through the North Carolina Streamwatch. But you can actually go into that map and look at what other people are submitting for their lichen observations as well. Unfortunately, at the moment, we've got a website glitch, so I'm not able to pull that up to show you all in real time. But once we get it figured out, it's going to be a really cool tool for you all to, explore with. And one last thing I wanted to show you all is back in February, Keith, myself, and another coworker, we went to Whiteville, Lake Waccamaw area for a workshop. And so while we were at the state park, we came across these like big patches of what I'm going to call reindeer lichen, because that's what I've heard other people call it. But this lichen was so spongy, it was so moist and kind of buoyant that it was just so much fun to like pick up and hold and play with. And I had every intention on taking it home. Because I mean, just like look at that big patch of lichen. My opinion, I think that would be the perfect place for a little woodland troll to go and like take a nap on. And there I have my lichen sample in my hand. Maybe not. Maybe I can't do that. Okay, here we go. So I was gonna take that little guy home with me. And so as we're like on our walk, I have this lichen in my hand. And at some point I flipped it over and I realized that the part of the lichen that was previously just touching the palm of my hand was now very rough, was now not as flexible as the part of the lichen that was not that was exposed to the elements rather than to the palm of my hand. So I just think that's a really interesting thing to have learned about lichen is, they really do just absorb everything that's in the air. But again, because it was in my palm, it wasn't being able to get that nutrient. So it was already starting to have some physical effects. So I could keep rambling about lichen, and I'm not going to do that because I know Keith has some other really interesting things to share with you all. But we lichen talking about lichen. So if you have any lichen questions, please feel free to ask. But I'm gonna stop sharing and let Keith keep on going.
So just to keep on that lichen model, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is a great thing to have in North Carolina. A lot of people know that it's one of the most biodiverse places in the world, especially with salamanders and a lot of other animals. But just to give you an idea, this giant book is the lichen field guide for just the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I mean, there are thousands of lichens in here, which is really interesting. And the person who wrote this book, the people, they were doing lichen studies in the park over the last 10 and 15 years. And they're beginning to get composite data of what we know about the air. And again, the lichens and what we know tell us that the air is getting better. But they're not the only thing that we use for citizen science in the air. And I will share my screen once again. So some animals are affected. So this is a dusky salamander in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This is former park employee Susan Sachs, but we're doing a salamander study. So we are catching salamanders, weighing them, looking at them, then returning them to where we found them. But since salamanders get all of they get breathe through their skin, they are also bioindicators. We've got snails. Again, the type of snail is affected because if you see these two snails, what do you notice is different about the shells of these two snails?
Could I say that one looks smaller and the other one looks like bigger? Like there's the size.
So there's the size. The one in the bottom picture is about an inch across. The one on the top is about it's about 3/4 or about half an inch.
Ruth also observes that the one on the top is darker.
Do you see how the shell is shiny, like your fingernails? It's because it's made out of a different material. It's made out of chitin, which is the same material that your fingernails are made out of. The one on the bottom, it's got a calcium-based shell. And the one on the bottom, it can go entirely into the shell. And this is actually really cool. I just found this out last year, the year before. You see that pattern in there? That pattern is actually the back of the snail. It's not in the shell. This one, so if this one is got a chitin or protein shell, and this one has a calcium-based shell, which one do you think will be affected more by air pollution, and in particular acid rain?
The one that's the calcium shell.
Yeah,
And then the other one.
You can, they are thinner and thinner, and you can actually see some calcium damage. This is damage from air quality and acid deposition on the end of this snail. So we can look at other bioindicators, and I'm going to go up to a couple. I have my own lichen pictures. So there's some plants. This is milkweed, and this is the top of the leaf, and you see how it's got that reddish color? That's actually the damage of ground level ozone eating away at this plant. You can tell it's ground level ozone because it stays on in between the veins. It doesn't grow in the veins, but the bottom, you don't see these traces. So there are plants, there are animals, and they're all affected, though not as necessarily as much as people. But we can use this to study them in a citizen science capacity, because people don't like it when you start studying the health effects on an individual person is not so easy. So that is how we learned what we did. And so here we have pictures from the same camera. This picture here, this mountain is Look Rock in Tennessee. It's taken from a webcam, which is on top of Clingman's or Kewohee, formerly Clingman's Dome. It's the highest point in the Smokies. And you can tell visibility is affected. And right now we're here. We want to be here, but the air is getting cleaner. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. And one of the big ones is the Clean Smokestacks Act that was passed in 2002. It actually required the power generation units to stop burning coal. And I'm kind of going to go back in time a little, but as you can see, the emissions of these plants went down. At the same time, the air quality gets better. And if you look on a really detailed graph of the air pollution, we can literally see when different scrubbers or different power plants stopped using coal. There are other things that happened. The Clean Air Act in 1971. So these laws came about because people were getting sick. And and I'll share this link to you, we have a really good video on the Clean Smokestacks Act that we produced for students, but it's about 10 minutes long, which talks about how this act was passed. And we really wanted to capture these people. We did this about 10 years ago while they were, still alive. Some of them not alive anymore. But we categorize pollution into ground level ozone and particulate matter. But I want to pause here because we got a few minutes left in the presentation, and I can go in a lot of different directions. What would you like to know about the air and how we measure it? And what questions do you have about how we do the science or what we find interesting?
We have a small enough group that if anyone just wants to unmute themselves and call out what you'd like to know more about, please feel free. You are also still welcome to just drop it into the chat. Leah, by the way, is asking for the not just the links to the websites, but the links to YouTube and the Venmo link. So if y'all wouldn't mind just throwing all of that into a email later, that'd be great.
I have them on a document, but for some reason it doesn't want me to chat with you all right now, and I'm not sure why.
That's okay. You can just send it as an attachment to me.
But I will. Yeah, I can send that to you. Yeah. I'll send you a little one that has just the links we talked about today, and then I'll send you a giant one which has lots of links. So you can go down this rabbit hole to your heart's content.
Ruth asked, what are some other industries that contribute to air pollution and how do they measure emissions?
So we measure emissions using a couple different types of machines. Like on the screen that's up, it says ground level ozone. We use a machine that ground level ozone is a gas. And we have to shoot it with a laser and get it to fluoresce from this laser. And then because it reacts differently than oxygen. And with particulate matter, we use a machine that creates filters. And I've got a sample of one here. And as you see, this has dots on it. Well, each one of those dots is an hour of air pollution because it takes a microbalance, takes an hour on, and it gets trapped on the filter, and then we weigh it. And that microbalance sends data to our meteorologist right away. So it's basically a really, really fancy, really, really expensive scale. We're weighing it to the millionth of a gram, so really fancy scale. So we use machines to measure the different types of pollutants. Ground level ozone, in particular, it's our biggest concern because it's a secondary pollutant that comes from nitrogen oxides, which are, well, this is NO2. So this is a molecule of a type of air pollutant. It's a brown gas. If you breathe it in, you will get sick and or die. And the nitrogen oxide is measured more similar because it's a gas. We measure it using a different machine, but similar, that works similarly to the ozone machine. Mixed with volatile organic compounds, which are stuff that smell, and that's where the ground level ozone comes. But the thing that drives this is heat, like above 70 degrees, 80 degrees, and sunlight. And this ground level ozone will stay there till it reacts with something. Got particle pollution, which you'd call soot or dust. I mean, and it comes from burning stuff. And this is an example of a factory that no longer is there. Well, the buildings are there, but this is a paper mill. And for a long time, this was the biggest source of air pollution or second biggest source of air pollution in Western North Carolina. Before they shut it down, after they cleaned up the power plants, it was the third biggest store in the entire state. And you can see this part here. That's the air pollution. This bright white, that's steam. But all over this plant, there's another source there. This one had over 1,000 air pollution sites that we inspected every year to make sure they weren't polluting the air and making the people in this community unhealthy. So factories are a big part, especially paper mills, electrical generation are the big ones. That's a different sort of string of pictures. Other chemical plants, they're a big problem. Things that are making chemicals to sell the chemicals, they're pretty hazardous, though we look at those pollution differently. The biggest source of air pollution in North Carolina is actually mobile sources, cars and trucks and planes and trains and lawnmowers and all those things. Any other questions for now?
Yes, we do. How do industries reduce emissions rather than just stopping? Are there filters or any other solutions like that?
So they in general call them scrubbers. That's what the general public talks about. And I don't really have some pictures, the specifics, but again, if we look at this picture, so this right down here, that's where they're burning the coal. And this yellow part on top, those are scrubbers. And these are wet scrubbers, so they use water to dissolve the pollution out of the stack. And then that pollution will get processed into lime. They have other ones like volatile organic compounds. They happen because the nitrogen molecules break apart during combustion, temperatures above 2,700 degrees. So this nitrogen molecule, it will grab onto oxygen or water, forming nitric acid. It can even, and so what they do with this is they actually heat it up enough so the nitrogen can go back together. Different chemicals, different goals, we have different control devices. And they can get the air to a certain level of clean that's usually not harmful. It's why we have catalytic converters in the car. They actually help the nitrogen compounds and other air pollution turn into less unhealthy things. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to show you pictures of when air pollution was really bad.
I do
This
actually, I
picture is
do
from
have one quick question.
1948. One more question? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there like animals, like different types of animals that um get affected other than snails and salamanders?
So there are other animals that get affected. We have not studied them as much as snails and salamanders, but mammals like um, us as mammals, we can all get affected because we use so much air. There have been some studies showing different insects adapting to pollution. There's a moth that everybody thought was black with white spots in England 100 years ago. And as they took the coal pollution out of the air, they became white with black spots. So they adapted to the pollution. So there are a lot of different animals that get affected in different ways. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this picture, which may look like it's from night, it was taken at noon and so it lasted for about 5 days. About 20 people died during this, but they think that up to 50% of the people who were in Donora, Pennsylvania in 1948 died early. And that was kind of one of the first times that this type of air pollution problem became apparent. This happened because they were smelting copper and making wire in the town. And they said that the smoke had colors to it, green and orange and everything, and it would move around and people couldn't breathe. They'd use masks. London fog in 1951, this was a sulfur dioxide, sulfuric acid, because the city of London surrounded by coal-fired power plants. This is both an air and water quality problem. This is the Cuyahoga River in 1969, which caught on fire, not just once, but many times. So those things caused the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act to be passed, which helped us make the air cleaner. Los Angeles in 1953. But this is the picture that's really interesting to me because the EPA wanted to capture this. They had they developed all the air quality rules, all the water quality rules. So they sent artists out there to take pictures of pollution. This is the George Washington Bridge outside of New York City. This orange color is that nitrogen dioxide. It's one of the pollutants that we monitor. But I'm just going to go, wow, I've got a lot of extra slides. I want to show you this one. This is the same bridge taken in 2013. So you can see a dramatic improvement in the air because of those rules. So there are lots of things you can do to help as an individual, but we kind of break it down into driving less, using less electricity, and shopping smart. Also, don't burn trash because it's illegal, and you can get fined as much as $25,000 per pile per day. And that way you'll get to meet some of the other people who work for our division because we investigate. It's a complaint-based system. So if somebody's burning trash, you can call our regional offices and we will investigate it and we will look into every case. Fortunately, we found that if we send them what I call a nastygram, but it's a letter that tells them that their neighbors have complained about them burning trash, usually people don't do it again as far as we know. We don't get more complaints most of the time. Any other thoughts or questions? This is Got lots of pictures, lots of other stuff too. I have more toys also.
I have another question. Are either of you familiar with the air deposition of Gen X at the, I think it's Chemours plant in Fayetteville?
So the department has done a lot of research with Chemours and the Gen X materials because when they first started finding it, and so the Chemours plant is outside Fayetteville, and they first started finding this pollutant, and they thought it was getting through their water system, and it was going out into the river and ending up in Wilmington and places like that. They detected it. And they ended up, we discovered that it was traveling through the air also. And so for about 10 years, we were doing a pretty intensive monitoring program where we studied where it was to figure out where every one of our regional offices had and this is going to sound, so we used buckets, just like buckets that you get at Lowe's. And we would take them, and when it rained, we'd take them, we'd cap them, then we'd send it back to that water back to Raleigh where it would be, see if there's any Gen X in it. The one in Asheville never had a hit of Gen X, though all the other monitoring sites in the state did. And then around the plant, we had enough data to understand that it was following the windrows. And so we've worked a lot with them to figure out strategies to reduce this pollution getting into the environment. And they've done a lot there. So I don't have a model of Gen X. I might have a picture or a drawing. So it's a long, spindly molecule. And it's got fluorine in it. And so, yeah. But I don't have a model with me because, well, I have to buy more fluorine molecules, atoms.
Ruth has another question. She says, thank you, by the way, for the response. And she asks, how did you both get into air quality? Was it specific research, toxicology, ecology? Just what was your route, it sounds like?
So I have been working in education, science education for a long time. And so I went from working actually in geology museum and working for the National Park Service to start working in air quality education. It's really interesting because we have about 60 or 80 engineers who work for us. And this is something to tell your students if you have students or if you are a student, that for our engineers, we're pretty agnostic. We want people to understand how to study science, use the scientific principle. In engineering, we need to know that they can do the math to figure out how our pollution control systems. But nobody gets a degree in air quality engineering. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, kind of similar to Keith. I got my undergraduate degree in environmental studies, and I like to tell people it's kind of like the phrase jack of all trades, master of none. So with environmental studies, was taking a lot of different classes on a lot of different things and learning just enough to kind of, skim the iceberg, if you will. And it wasn't actually until, grad school was put online, was trying to find a job because of COVID, that I had a mentor reach out to me and said, hey, there's this job available. I think you'd be really good at it. It's in Raleigh. You'd be talking to people about air quality. You should apply. So again, along the lines of what Keith was saying, like everything I have learned about air quality has been on the job, talking with other people, talking with our meteorologists and our engineers and our chemists. None of what I've learned was, in a classroom, except for when I was in K through 12 classrooms, on the job. But this was not something I went to school for. But
There
Yeah.
is a professor at App State, Howie Neufeld, and he's a professor emeritus now, who actually did a lot of the on-the-ground research about the bioindicators. And then there's also a lab where they study it where in the med school at both Duke and UNC, where they do have specialists, people who focused in on how it affects. It's really an interesting because North Carolina has been really active in the learning about air, um, which again goes back to our topography because we have the opportunity to see how air reacts at high elevations, how it affects the plants and animals there, and then compare that to how that affects sometimes the same plants and animals at at the coast. So it's a good place to study. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing unless you want to see lots more pictures of air pollution.
No, that's all right. I was just going to prompt everyone to see if there are any more questions for our presenters. And again, feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them out loud as you've been doing. You can use your raised hand feature. We just have a few minutes left, but we can wrap up at any point if no one has further questions. Oh, I'm so glad I prompted. There's a couple more questions now. What is your favorite project that you've worked on in this job?
So I worked for several years on the It's Our Air curriculum, which is itsOurAir.org, and it's 13 activities, 9 videos. We correlated it to North Carolina standards for 9th grade, but and the videos were trying to show things that are impossible to have happen in the classroom. The activities are all things you can do in the classroom with things you probably already have in your kitchen. So that was really rewarding to work with. And it's really rewarding now because I still run into people who are using this curriculum in places we didn't plan for. Like there's an elementary school in the Raleigh region that uses the activities starting with kindergarten and all through, and they use our videos. And that was really rewarding to find out that people are out there using it in different ways. And also, if you go, what's the name of the tool? So there's a video quiz tool. And so we find our videos teachers will use this to help their students learn about it. So they'll take our videos, cut them up, put questions in there and everything. And I'm like, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite projects that I've worked on is actually I'll tell you about two because I love them both. One is this contest that Keith, kind of inherited through some air quality agencies up in the mountains, but it's the AQIQ contest, which is for 7th grade students. And I love it because it's really simple in concept, where we just have students look for an air quality problem, present the solution, but doing that in a creative way with the goal of educating others. So in the last week, we recently sent out the regional winners for this year, and I will tell you, these projects just get better and better every year, between the posters and the videos and the Minecraft world and the stories, the little flip chart book things that these kids can do is really, really impressive. So I love getting to see the creativeness of students because it just keeps accelerating year after year. But another project I'm also very passionate about is a workshop that I helped initiate. It's called the State of Awe, Air, Water, Earth, and it's where multiple divisions within the Department of Environmental Quality get together to provide kind of a sampler workshop basically providing an overview of the different educational materials that each of our divisions have to offer, because we're a state agency, everything we do is free. So we really want people to understand like just how expansive DEQ's resources really are. So doing that with the goal of trying to serve some of our underutilized communities. So those are my two favorites.
Awesome.
I'm
All right,
going
well,
to share
everyone-
one of our AQ/IQ contest projects. It's not even the best
Yes.
one, but it's really
Oh, cute.
we have our own superheroes and supervillains.
So cute. All right, guys. Well, that's about all we have time for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to our presenters for presenting. And for those of you who are seeking environmental education credit, you're going to receive a follow-up email later this week. At the latest, it'll be early next week with an attached EE form. And we'll be making this recording available on our environmental lecture series on YouTube at the Raleigh Parks website's account. We hope to see everyone again during our next lecture. We're going to have Rick Savage from Carolina Wetlands presenting on why we need to protect wetlands. So I hope you all will join us then. That will be June 8th from 7 to 8 p.m. All right, and that's it from Lake Johnson. Thanks again, everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate the questions.
Thank you.